wanted to talk some more about this word addiction. We would have all heard of the word addiction. We would have all said, perhaps we've all said, most of us, many of us would have said, oh, I'm addicted to chocolate, I'm addicted to tea. And I would say that it's true that we are all in some way addicted to or attached to or have a relationship with things that to a greater or lesser degree would cause us some amount of difficulty if we were to attempt to not do them anymore, to not take of these things anymore, or to end our relationship with them. We are, as a person, a distinct subject. We look out into the world through our senses, and there are trillions and trillions of objects. Most will never encounter some that we do. We're all brought up and socialised in a time frame in history. Here we all are. Wherever we are right now is where we are. In fact, wherever we are right in the now is where we've always been. We've never once left the now. We can't get into the now because we've never left the now. It's only the mind with its addictive patterns of thinking that is concerned with what was and what will be. And in fact, of all the ways in which we look at addiction, in all the ways that we might describe that, we are all somehow addicted to something. Primary thing with which we all have an addiction to, and you can check yourself on this, is to thinking. So we might have repetitive thoughts, we might have the same thoughts, we might have intrusive thoughts, a very complicated and painful condition. But we all essentially think. When we wake up in the morning, the first thing we do is think, or without even using words, acknowledge in our field of experience, I am awake. We wake up from a dream, we knew the dream and we know the waking world with which we wake up to. And then we may have a behavioural attachment to the pattern of our morning. We may have a morning discipline. Our spiritual discipline may just be to go to the toilet for a tinkle, make a cup of tea and make some breakfast, or not, or evade breakfast, or if you're like me, eat later when appetite is the next thing that spontaneously arises. But once we are awake in the morning, once we get out of bed, the mind, the thinking patterns, or the personality or self or egoic mind, the way in which we perceive the world and ourselves and our place in it, begins to navigate through our home, out the house, into the world of others and otherness, and begin to monitor and modulate and change and adapt and restrict and break out into different ways of being, different behaviours, different sets of attitude, different responses through our senses to the things that we see and the feelings that we have about them. This is essentially to describe the human experience of the world, how I experience my life. We all have a life. And to a greater or lesser degree, for some of us, we like our life, or we find our life disgusting. You know, there's a parameter there from disgust and hatred of our own existence to loving life and feeling happy, joyous and free, we might say. And I feel like, should we get old enough to have known both and hopefully not be still trapped in misery and difficulty and struggle and suffering in elder age, then I would say this is true riches. I would say that this is the way in which we have lived the fullest life, to have known abject misery and joyous ecstasy as very human experiences. These are the gifts we're given. Both can be transformative experiences should we need transformation to move from point A to point B, and at some undiscernible point in the movement to be transformed, that is, to be put together in a new order, or to be put together in the right order if we're moving from brokenness, struggle and emptiness. And we have had experiences of happiness, joyousness and freedom which we're no longer having, and we're hurting, and we want to be transformed out of that. We can be put back together then in the right order. Who's to say what the right and wrong order is? If we're in suffering and we're attached to that, and we're addicted and stuck in the feelings and the thoughts, maybe we don't have a process, maybe we're not able to articulate what we're going through. And of course, let's not make light of depression and struggle and suffering. It ends lives. It just ends lives. But of course, it transforms life. What is the difficulty in that? Often it can be that even though we're in difficulties, struggle and suffering, and we're overwhelmed by our everyday experience or the thoughts and feelings we have about our everyday experience, sometimes that can seem really comfortable, given that the thought arises that where I'd like to get to out of this terrible place, I've never experienced before, or I don't know what this new experience of happiness is going to look like. So it's easier to hold on, think about that phrase, to hold on to the difficulty that we do have, better the devil, we say, as you might know. Yep, letting go isn't the issue. You know, the attachment or the addiction to the thoughts and the feelings about the holding on to the depression is the issue. Letting go is letting go. It's more let go. It's not the person and we're holding on. It's just the dynamics and the dystopian allure of the difficulty that we're trapped in, that we're enslaved to. The thoughts and feelings. I am having my depressing thoughts, my depressing feelings, my particular circumstance or trauma. We are there and it's familiar. We wake up every day and this difficulty is familiar. So we can stay there. Some of us never come out, as we've stated. Yet, difficulty, struggle, suffering, misery and ecstasy, they're a spectrum of human experiences that we might all know by the end of our time in this body on this plane. Perhaps. Anyway, regardless, we can be addicted to our miserable feelings. We can become addicted to the idea of completely capturing happy feelings, happy thoughts. Interestingly, having known an experience of misery, struggle or difficulty, once we experience happiness, joyfulness, peacefulness and freedom, the allure of that, and naturally we would all want to be happy, though some of us do like to wallow in the mire of our suffering, or some of us have a propensity towards difficulty. But once we achieve, or happiness finds us, one of the complex features about that is that we can become so attached to chasing that feeling or staying with that feeling because we never want to go to that dark or shadowy place. This gives us some insight into the nature of people where their attachment to things, and often things can be feelings and sensations in the body. I mean, every attachment, every addiction is about the feelings we have about it. So all addictions, even thought, even happy feelings, are the experience of those. We experience those internally or inside of consciousness or in our awareness. We're aware of being happy. We're aware of being miserable. So we're aware of these things. We want to avoid one and we want to enable the other. And substances, alcohol, food, drugs, people, places, things, all of these things, whether substances or objects, external objects, bring about sensations in the body, neurological sensations at the synapse, the movement of serotonin, dopamine, GABA, acetylcholine, neurotransmitters, trigger a response. A more recent phenomenal way of describing an ancient phenomenon is the idea of chaos creators. We will have all met people that are cyclically going through some struggle or another, or in difficulty or trauma. Perhaps you've met someone, each time you meet them, a cat's died, another grandparent has died, they've got no money, they have no electricity. I think I've had periods, certainly, of being a chaos creator. The more I stayed in that difficulty, suffering and struggle, the more I seem to draw that energy, and use that word loosely, because I don't want it to seem new agey or trite, but that, you know, I seem to attract that sense of shadow. You know, I was overwhelmed by my own shadow. I was a slave to suffering and difficulty. So I attracted that kind of energy. I believe we get where we're at. We always get where we're at in relationships, in our finances, in our external life, in our attitudes and behaviours. We like-mindedness attaches to like-mindedness is another way in which we become attached to where we're at. And there's comfort in that. Two of the, what I think are really interesting addictions or attachments to have are comfort and security. So we all like to feel comfortable. We all like to feel safe. We should like to feel comfortable and we should like to feel safe. But in being overly attached to comfort and safety, not that I'm saying we should feel unsafe or discomfort, but we should be able to have some kind of a relationship with holding the tension, as the mystics say, holding the tension of difficulty. This brings up ideas of resilience and tenacity and perseverance, you know, to hold the tension of difficulty. To the mystics describe the third way. The first way is to bury our head in the sand in the face of difficulty and to ignore the problem that we have, hoping it will go away. Denial systems. Don't even notice I am lying. Denial. Or outright avoidance. We do know that we're lying to ourselves, but our narrative and our expression of that which we're avoiding, even though we're awake to it, still says it isn't happening. This is the first way, to bury our head in the sand. The second way that human beings are quite familiar with is the way of violence. That is to meet the difficulty with a spirit of aggression and of violence. This is another insight into the nature of drug addiction, or self-harm even is another form of attachment that modern peoples use, where we take out the difficulty that we're experiencing on the body. We introvert our anger and our problem, and we cause pain, but the pain brings us pleasure. The pain of self-harm, of drug addiction, as well as the drugs themselves, again trigger neurological responses at the synapse, dopamine, serotonin and such. That each of those objects that we use, self-harm, drugs, alcohol, food, sex, pornography, even financial addiction, that is not difficulty to financial difficulty, though I'm sure we can become overly attached to having poor finances, or we just don't want to look at our finances and have recovery around our finances. But to have recovery in our finances and to become overly attached to chasing money, chasing a pound note, as some of my London friends call it. Well, and we get into work addiction and compulsively attached to working as many hours as we can to save money that we no longer really need. So again, you know, yet another way in which we can seem to be chasing happiness, but we're stuck in this trap of moving out of difficulty and misery. Yet all of these, to draw all this together, all of these are at first the simple prosaic thought, the human animal that does wake up in the morning, the personality is the thing that wakes up. Before that, there was deep sleep, and there may have been a dream state. But when we wake up, the day is on, we're switched on, and out we go into a world and try and navigate at best to try and accumulate safety and comfort and security, positive feelings, positive neurological responses. And as we've seen, we may even use things that culture and society and even we morally believe to be wrong, but there's still a buzz in it. You know, there's a buzz for criminals in criminology. There's a buzz for each of us. There's a buzz in the errors we make. There's always that biological response. We are biological, we are psychological, we are social animals, and there is our emotional spectrum, or our spirit, we are spiritual animals. We are bio, psycho, social, spiritual animals. We have families, we have friends, we have healthy attachments, we have healthy attachment styles, we have unhealthy attachments. And we navigate this story called life, my life, whilst we're here, between our birth that we don't remember and the death that we'll never know. We might know dying, but we might not ever know death. And in that, it is a world of attachments, it is a world of forms, and there are ways in which we can develop an understanding and a way in which we can see how healthy it is to become unattached, to detach from things. Traditions point towards this. There's a modern undercurrent as our world becomes so focused on the accumulation of information, possessions, redescribing our public image, our social image. Our false sense of self now has a forum, social media, with which to create a false sense of the false sense of self. So I'm living out of my egoic mind, out of my sensed, separate self, the mental construct I have about who I am and how I would like other people to see me. I can live out of that and then recreate an even more refined and perfected and addicted, finally, sense of personality that I could never be. We can post images on social media of the person that we're not but would like to be, and we can describe on other people's posts and make comments about a morality and an understanding and a type of personality and an expression of attitudes and behaviours that we're not. We can just create such a fake sense of self. But as this fake sense of the world, which has always been there, there's always been an egoic sense of presenting ourselves in a particular way. Primary addiction, we all have personality. As there has always been that, we've now got a much more aggressive and difficult way of projecting that in social media. Yet as there is all of that, underneath that, because everything brings its opposite, there's an increasing sense of simplifying our lives, of living more frugally, of living with less possessions, and of just becoming happy with what we have, rather than what we would be or how you would see me.